your time is best spent talking with your clients and closing your clients. So I would say you even can get caught up in delivery, right? So like delivering for your clients, again, we want to deliver for our clients, but our greatest value is in the knowledge that we have. Yes, you can listen to a lot of things, but seek to implement, right? Because you can just fill your mind with great ideas, but that's why I do the notes, because then, like today, I ran for about 35, 40 minutes. I recorded some stuff. As soon as I got back, I implemented, right? I did those, just a list of a couple of things, but I took, 15, 20 minutes to put those into practice. And I think that's a lot of things that people, they've got great ideas, but they don't ever, take time to implement. If you really know who your audience is, and you can start conversations. It's not hard to do. And there's a lot of other ways you can do that now. But yeah, I'm amazed at people that spend $10,000, $20,000 a month on things like that. And they get a little bit of activity, but they really got to go back and look at their acquisition cost and their cost per customer and things like that. It's hard to grow, hard to scale, hard to because great businesses are run on great people, process, and technology. And I think where a lot of solopreneurs miss it is the process, right? Because if everything is unique, you'll never scale beyond yourself, and you'll burn yourself out. But you've got to say, okay, here's something we do. We've done this for multiple customers. Okay, let's make that into a product that we can deliver. Certainly, there'll be nuances, but once you get a track record on that, people go, oh yeah, I want one of those as well.
You just heard Dan Griffith open up about those early days when he wasn't certain he'd make it, and the mindset shift that changed everything. In this episode, we go deeper into that transformation, why building your brand around mistakes instead of perfection actually builds trust, how to price your expertise without selling by the hour, and the real reason so many solopreneurs pour money into marketing that doesn't convert. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of Boost Solo. My next guest jokes about having vocational ADD, but after more than 15 years in enterprise sales, he found his groove, helping SaaS founders sidestep the seriously don't do that mistakes he's seen play out at more than 50 companies. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart, even as we talked in the run up to the show. So I'm excited to join you today.
We're going to dig into all the good stuff and all the twists and turns you talked to me about. So actually, I want to start with what I mentioned in the intro. Now, you described yourself as having vocational ADD, right? You've had some twists and turns from accounting to law school to sales. So tell us a little bit about those twists and turns and what made you realize the traditional path wasn't for you, and how did you eventually find your way to sales?
Yeah, so I think at the root I was always a salesperson. It just took me a long time to figure that out. I have an undergrad degree in accounting. I knew enough when I was studying accounting that I didn't want to spend time behind a desk every day. And I guess what the amazing thing is now, I spend a lot of time behind a desk every day, but I'm doing what I love to do. But yeah, accounting didn't really appeal to me. And then I went to law school and had an opportunity to work in state government. I learned that one wasn't for me. And IBM came knocking and I said yes. So I was very fortunate to go get my sales training with IBM and then spent, like you said in the intro, about 15 years in enterprise sales, really for large Fortune 50 companies. Enjoyed that, but I didn't enjoy the politics of it. I really just wanted to go out and succeed, and also wanted to have a little more of a say in kind of what happened and how things happened. I was telling somebody the story earlier today that I felt like when I was in enterprise sales for large companies, I always had to do what I knew was going to impact the number, even when it was against what everybody was saying. So I said, I always felt like I was swimming upstream there. But and then I left Fortune 50 and started working for small companies and really enjoyed that. I mean, that that was a great opportunity. I had a couple of really, really nice exits and growth. And then, like you said, I realized, okay, I really enjoy helping growth stage companies, and I wanted to help more than one. So in 2018, went out on my own, and I always describe those first probably 2 years as watching a plane doing touch and go landings. I felt like I'd be in the air and then I'd be on the ground, and then I'd be in the air again, and then I'd be on the ground again. But after those 2 years, really heading into COVID was where I really felt like I hit my stride, and then was able to start a couple other companies as I went through there. So yes, it's a lot of fun, but at the core was helping people, and I really, really enjoyed. That was to me the biggest. I think the biggest breakthrough was realizing that what I was passionate about in sales was not really the money. The money was good,
Right. Yeah.
but it was about helping people and being able to go. I've started doing local sales, but being able to drive by a business and go, oh, I was able to help that person. That to me, that was really what I enjoyed.
Yeah, no, I love that. And there are lots of themes you touched on there that we're going to dig into a little bit as we get into our conversation, from the ups and downs to the sort of real that switch from money to helping people. We'll talk about all of that. But the one thing I want to ask you before we get into that is, you also talked to me about how your time at Fortune 50 companies, you saw a lot of ways to do things, but you also saw a lot of ways to not do things, right? So looking back on that, were there some recurring patterns of frustrations that eventually led you to your seriously don't do that philosophy?
Yeah, well, there was a lot. I jokingly say there was a lot of late nights and early mornings when I was with people that I worked with, and we would say something like, seriously, don't do that. And people would say, oh, you ought to write a book on that someday. And I was like, oh, never, I'll do that. Although I'll give you a little bit of a reveal here on the show. I am actually working on a book. We're hoping to have that out. That's the first time actually that I've told anybody that we're doing that, but we're hoping to have that out probably in the first quarter of next year. But to your question, I think I saw a lot of, especially around the sales and marketing, not knowing your customer, right? So really spending a lot of money and time on things that either indicated we didn't know the customer or not connecting with the customer. I saw a lot of sales management that was really focused on activity versus results, and
Right.
that was also focused on trying to produce that activity just by sheer effort rather than really trying to develop the sales team. And I think that's one thing that really has permeated my career is trying to bring people in and work with them and developing them in when they get a great opportunity, push them out of the nest and help them out there. I think, and I was very fortunate in my career to have mentors that did that as well.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because I think that's the disconnect. A lot of people that I work with too, the first thing I always tell them is, I always call it missing step two, right? Everyone has an offer, and then they jump to like finding leads and marketing and selling people.
Right.
They
Right.
miss sort of the foundational piece, which is, who are you talking to? What problem are you solving? And it's not 14 problems or 10 problems. And how do you do it differently or uniquely, right?
Right.
And people always miss that piece, and then they blame marketing for not working. So,
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's funny that you mentioned that. That's the other thing that I learned is that marketing and sales cannot be separate. As a matter of fact, it's the first thing I do when I start to work with a company is we bring the teams together, because I just got a lot of this. And again, the larger the company, the more of this that you're doing. Marketing says the salespeople can't sell. Salespeople say the marketing leads all suck, and you're just stuck there. So yeah, but that's a great point. And I think maybe even one other thing around that is the one thing that's changed is when I started selling. This is going to sound like an old man sales, but like it was the phone, right? Or you walked in somewhere. No internet. We had fax machines. I know for some of your listeners, they think that's probably in the dark ages. My kids are probably thinking that if they watch this. But I think today, just all of the channels that you can interact in too, I like to use the term, you got to figure out where the digital watering hole is these days,
Right.
to figure out where your customer is. So I think that's made it more challenging.
Yeah, no, you're right. And also, that's a really good point, because otherwise you're inundating people, which is having the opposite effect of actually,
Right.
getting them interested. So no, you're right. I love that digital watermill. I have to
Yeah.
use that.
Well,
So
and I'd say it's an attraction strategy now, right? It used to be we
yeah,
would push
true,
a lot of things out, and you want to,
true.
I said to take that maybe the next level, you want to attract people to your digital watering hole, right? You want to attract
Yeah.
them in there rather than push it. But yes, it as as happened over time, things change tremendously.
True. Yeah. And they will, and the pace of change now is just
Yeah,
mind
yeah,
boggling. Yeah.
that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had somebody told me they were an expert in AI, and I was like, okay, I mean, if you think so, but tomorrow that may all change, and you might be irrelevant.
Well, and honestly, I mean, we're on the same page. I'm like, AI hasn't been around long enough for anyone to
Right,
actually be an expert in it yet.
right,
And
right.
also, to your point, the rate of change, the pace at which
Yeah.
it changes, your expertise, can be,
Yes.
you'll be treading water the next day. So yeah.
No, yeah, no
Uh,
question.
so in 2018, you made the leap to consulting, right? But you said
Yes.
there were times when you weren't sure you'd pay the bills, and you mentioned taking opportunities you didn't love just to pay the bills, right? So paint
Right.
me a picture
Right.
of your
Right.
low moment and what was going through your
Yeah.
head then.
Yes. So I was fortunate to start with I had my first client was tremendous. They were,
Yeah.
and they, he really mentored me and encouraged me to make the leap and said, hey, you need to do that. So I always, I'm always thankful for that person that said, you really need to do this. And I was very nervous to do it, but I did and had success with it. I think early on, I didn't have the benefit of developing my business while I was employed at something else, which it's kind of a burn the ships type mentality. I mean, it it had to pretty much had to be successful because I was supporting the family. At that time, we were a single wage earner family, so it's a little bit scary. But I think early on, just taking any client that would say yes or would agree
Yeah.
was a bad strategy. I probably should have been a little more disciplined. I did learn a lot of things to seriously don't do that contributed to or added to what I already said for people not to do. Um, and I think I took some more like W-2. I took a W-2 role in there, which was a huge mistake. Well, I don't know that anything I would say is a huge mistake because I learned from
Yeah.
all of those things, but that really, I think, set me back a little bit and distracted me from really focusing on what I needed to focus on. And then I think, everybody has the imposter syndrome when you come out, even though, you do have a lot of experience. And, in my instance, I had almost 20 years of experience
Yeah.
when I broke out. Um, you still have those times where you're like, well, I'm not sure that I should be doing this, or that people should be paying me to do this. Right. And I think there's also that tendency to not take the fees that you really should be taking because you have a little bit of imposter syndrome going on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think those are sort of, and again, this is not something people talk about, right? People are out there
right,
saying you should always charge your worth and, like, don't undervalue yourself. But I think it's confidence builds the value, right? In
right,
terms of your price tag. And I
right.
think everyone has to sort of go through that. But there was something interesting you told me also in terms of, so you said that for you, the page turned on your journey when you realized the real value was in delivering value to your customers, not just the fees you were earning, right?
Uh-huh.
So could you talk a little bit of what the before was like, and when you were focused more on the money, and the after, once you made that mindset shift?
Yeah, I think a little bit is a scarcity mindset
Yeah.
that I think when you're in sales, you might find that scarcity mindset more prevalent in people that are in, let's say, corporate enterprise sales, because you're always at the kind of at the whim of the company. Just talking with a friend today, super successful with his company, but got caught off in a large layoff. So he's now, looking for a job. And I think people always operate from that, a little bit of that scarcity mindset. So I think that was part of it. And I think also realizing, okay, I need to I need to pay the bills. There's these things I need to do. And taking, probably the customers that I shouldn't, meant that I was not really as passionate about helping them, or I took people that I really shouldn't have done, they didn't want to be coachable, or they didn't want to pay, or things like that. So
Right.
I think, just, and I think fear, like living in fear of that, is all part of it. But I think the real revelation was, okay, I'm providing, what tangibly am I doing? I started thinking about what tangibly am I doing to help these customers. And I still remind myself of that every day. I mean, at the beginning of the day, what am I doing today to help my customers and help my prospects, or help my, whomever I'm dealing with. And I think changing that mindset really, number one, helped me focus, because I think there's, like, when you don't have that focus on helping and providing value, you tend to do busy work sometimes for your customers that doesn't impact whatever you're trying to impact,
Right.
in my case, whether it's sales, marketing, but it could be, operations, could be whatever you're doing, but you end up, to me, squandering some of your time and squandering your customers' time, when you don't do that. And I think, as I started to think about that, I think that worked better. And I think also I started taking a lot of conversations with people that I probably wouldn't have before, but that needed help. And amazingly, as it always is, those turned into customers. So I started doing some work with mentoring with accelerators and a couple of incubators, and I'm still amazed at the amount of those conversations that I have, where people come back, they get funding, they're growing, and they remember you. I mean, I had a company that honestly, this company that I helped, I thought they were beyond help. But I spent a lot of time with them, and they didn't end up hiring me. And the company did eventually break up. People went different ways. And I got a call, I got a LinkedIn message about a month ago from somebody that said, "Hey, one of our board members told me to reach out to you." And I was like, "Who was your board member?" Oh, it was one of those people. So yeah, so it's just, those, even if it doesn't come around, it's the right thing to do. But I think when you do that and you're interested in helping people, that the biggest change it makes is for you, even though, the people outside you, but it changes your philosophy and how you approach things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I love that you mentioned the scarcity mindset, because I think that is something we all struggle with, and it's almost like the feast or famine thing, right? When you're approaching it from a point of view of like desperation, and you're focused rather than on delivering value. And I remember it was actually, which I think is kind of relevant, is Bobby Jones is a golfer. I don't know if you play golf, but
yes.
I loved his quote, which is, the game of golf is won and lost in the 6 square inches between my ears, right? And I think that is so true as a solopreneur too, right? Just sort of getting to the shift that you talked about, moving away from worrying about money is when you will start being able to focus on delivering value, and then it sort of follows. So yeah, no, I absolutely love that. So I want to talk a little bit about personal branding now, and about brand building. Now, interestingly, most consultants try to position themselves as having all the answers, right? And stand out by giving people like, here are 10 things you should be doing, right? Now you flip that completely and built a brand around what not to do. So why do you think that framing resonates so well? And what does it let you say that a more traditional voice wouldn't, perhaps?
Yeah. So, boy, a lot of packed into that question. I got to try to think about where I want to start. I try to be very transparent with people. And I think where it started was just sharing the mistakes that I've made,
Yeah.
which is sometimes hard to do. But as I've gotten older and you look back and go, okay, yeah, wow, that was really dumb. I did that. And, you reap the results of doing stupid things. And then you see people do things over and over again. And by the way, a lot of it, there's a lot of what we would call conventional knowledge out there. I would say, LinkedIn, X. I don't really do anything on Facebook and Instagram because they're more B2C brands. Although my social media guy says, oh, you need to do more there. People would listen to what you're talking about. And we do YouTube. But I think everything out there is, do this and do that. And there's a lot of bad information. I mean, like a lot of really bad information. Everybody's an expert. And with, like we talked about at the very beginning, all of those media sources are flooded with, these things. And now I can say, hey, I've been doing this 30 years. So I really do know what I'm talking about. But it's amazing to me. You see people that have been doing things for 2 years and they're the expert, right? Well, no, not that you can't contribute value, but when you've been around a long time, you're just going to see more. So I've really tried to do it around steering people away from disaster, because I have seen it and I have lived it, and it's not fun. And I'm thought, well, gosh, if I can help somebody, again, it's going back to helping people, if I can help them avoid that, or steer them away from that, then great. There's still a lot of things that people do that a lot of the quote conventional knowledge that isn't great. I think the other thing too is it's helped narrow my market a little bit. Just to be very transparent, there are certain, well, I'll just like venture capital VCs. I don't do really any business with them because, in my mind, a VC is going to, their goal is to buy something and flip it to the next person and make more money on it. Well, to me, that's not building long-term value in your company. People do that, and that's fine. But a lot of people use that same mindset when they're trying to build long-term value in their company, which is absolutely wrong, right? Because that's why I always ask people, what's your goal with your company? And if they say, well, I want to flip it in 18 months. Okay, well, there's things you do, right? But you don't want to take that same advice if you're trying to build, 5 years, 10 years, or, trying to build kind of that steady growth. But, so I went down a little bit of a rabbit trail there, but it was, it's fun, and it's been fun building the brand around that. And by the way, Nikhil, we didn't really use that all that much until this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'd always done that, and so maybe something else for your audience as a solopreneur, being consistent with your content is important, right? So we talk about building a brand, and I was not, right? I would just put something out here, put something out there, but I committed at the beginning of this year, okay, I'm going to record a live event each week. I'm going to do and boy, it was like the first ones were really bad, just because, I was committed to doing it, but I got out there, and then you get better as you go along. But we hadn't really built that brand until then. And of course it's taken off, and people know me as a seriously don't do that guy.
Yeah, but absolutely. And you're right. I mean, you have to, firstly, you understand your niche. And I also say it's very important to understand who you don't serve and who you won't work with. Right. That is equally important. Right. In sort of defining your, threading that needle. And also, like you said, and I always tell people, like the brand gets shaped by the outside world, not by you, right? I mean, it's Jeff Bezos says, brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So you have very little control over that. But until you put it out there, you're not going to get the feedback and be able to cut away the noise, right?
Something that I'll mention, it might be interesting, because when you said that brand is determined by other people, early on, I took some time to think about, okay, what are all the things that so these are for folks that are thinking about maybe going on the solopreneur journey. All the things that I love to do and all the things I didn't like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And to help me kind of figure out, and I, put them over there. And then I said, okay, what are all the things that people have, said about me over the years, right? And, what their perceptions were. And I always joke because people said, are you from New York? And I would say, well, no, I'm not really. Well, you're like a New Yorker. You're just very blunt, you tell people, and you're not afraid to tell them what to do and what not to do. And I think part of that also comes from coaching. I've coached basketball for almost 30 years. My father was a coach. So I think my mom was a teacher. So, I mean, that was kind of ingrained in there. But yeah, that's really what kind of drove the telling people what not to do.
Yeah, and it's in your DNA, right? I mean, that's what
Right.
you have to
Right.
sort of be authentic to who you are, but then the market will sort of give you feedback and help you refine it and shape it,
Right.
right? And ultimately, they will decide how they engage with your brand, right? That's what I mean. What they take away in their mind becomes your brand. So it's just sort of, and it's a hard concept to understand, but you can't really shape it and mold it. Like you can't sit in a room and whiteboard it to create the perfect brand, right?
The market's going to speak, and then of course you want to fail fast, right? If you're going down a path of something that's not working. I mean, we've iterated numerous times. I had somebody tell me, actually, it was just this morning, oh, well, you're way ahead of me. I was like, well, no, I just have been doing this a little bit longer, and I've failed a lot more on things, and then you kind of find what that success is, and then you double down on that, right? You do more of it, which is, I think, is one of the keys to success.
Yeah, absolutely. And trial and error. I mean, I'm going through that too in my first year and a half of this company, right? I'm still moving my brand. So it's all part of the journey. So now the other thing that was interesting, we touched on a little bit at the beginning, was back when you launched your agency, you were seeing a lot of frustrated clients who were spending money on marketing without ever landing a sales call, right? So what was broken in their brand or marketing, and what did you feel compelled to fix?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I maybe give you a little more background on this. So I originally started just doing fractional sales and fractional sales leadership, which I loved. Was very successful with that. But as I started to work with more companies and was in like a CRO, fractional CRO leadership role, I began to do a lot more work with traditional, I'll say, marketing agencies, and got very frustrated because we were spending a lot of money, but it wasn't tied to, when I say tied, it wasn't driving, the ROI was not driving sales conversations. And of course, in the enterprise space, and we do a lot, I'd say, in the highly regulated space. So healthcare, banking, financial services, insurance. We have clients in other areas, but that's where a lot of our focus is. It was important to start that conversation. Of course, with all that noise out there, marketing to me was the tool that we needed to cut through that. And I didn't see that happening. There was a lot of focus on tactics and not a lot of focus on results. Now, I'm not saying to me the pay-per-performance model is flawed because there's not mutual investment in it. So I'm saying you want to have both sides investing, right, in it. But I didn't see a lot of focus on that. So that's actually when I started the digital agency. Was I said I didn't find anything out there, so I'm like, I'm going to start that. And so I actually started that with my son, who was headed off to college at that time. And today in that agency, we've got probably our average age is like 24, so they're all young people there. But a lot of them have come through and then have left and have gone and started their own thing, which is what we love to do there. But yeah, back to your question, it was marketing just for the sake of marketing, going to a conference, right? The one that always killed me is you spend $20, $30, $40, $50,000, sometimes $100,000 on a conference and up, and you walk away with literally no sales conversations, like nothing that's really, and they're like, oh, well, we built the brand, but yeah, you just blew through $100,000 and you have nothing to show for it. And there was no follow-up. There's no, nothing with that. So, and I think that becomes like with the companies we're working with, they may spend that kind of money, but that's a much bigger impact for a $20 million a year company than it is for a $1 billion a year. That's a drop in the hat for them, and they can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I agree. I mean, people always there's always that argument between brand or performance, right? And
Right.
which is it? And I'm like, it's both. You
Right.
can't do one or the other, and everything should really perform, right? It's a question of what you're
Right.
measuring, what your objectives are, and what you want the outcomes to be. So I completely agree. The days of just sort of floating a banner in the sky and saying, "Hey, people
Yeah.
know us better now," are gone. So
Well, you
people don't
you
have the
th-
luxury anymore.
you think, Nikhil, but man, I still see people. It amazes me, people that are spending. Like I was talking to a founder out in the West Coast, and he was doing basically a PR blitz for an early stage product, and I was like, I, I did have to tell him, seriously, don't do that, or I tried to tell him that, but it's just, it wasn't in today's world where we can connect directly with our ideal customer profile wherever they might be. Doing that PR, that's a big company strategy. He had come out of a big company, so it made sense as to why he's doing it. But he was going to blow a tenth of his funding, with a PR agency and all of that. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to come up with much.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you're right. I mean, an IBM has the luxury of doing some of that. They can sponsor the Ryder Cup, which is on right now,
Right,
and
right.
fine, they're doing big stages and they may have a little more sort of intangible ROI there, right? But there is value there in terms of the audience they're going after. But then you bring that lens down to a solopreneur who's spending like $5,000 on Facebook. And I'm always like, you've got to be very clear about who you're talking to. Again, going back to what I was saying, what problem you're solving and how you do it uniquely. Otherwise, you're not going to connect, right?
Right.
We don't have the luxury of being able to just get our name out there for like a few, for whatever amount of time.
Yeah.
You really have to connect the dots.
And I see a lot of solopreneurs spending money on things like Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads. And most of the time that's wasted money. I mean, I'm just being blunt, because you're not targeting your market directly, and you're literally paying for somebody else's algorithm, and you just got to hope that they got it right. Well, now if you really know who your audience is, you can start conversations. That's not hard to do, and there's a lot of other ways you can do that now. But yeah, I'm amazed at people that spend $10,000, $20,000 a month on things like that, and they get a little bit of activity, but they really got to go back and look at their acquisition cost and their cost per customer and things like that.
Yeah, true. And I love your idea of the watering hole, right? Getting people to come to your watering hole. Once you're clear on who your audience is and the value you provide, that becomes a lot easier to build a strategy around. So,
well, and you have to provide value there, right? And you have to provide value. I mean, that's like you obviously do it with your podcast. So we do it with ours, in just making sure that at the end that there is something of value that you're providing to people, which, Nikhil, I didn't mention in our run-up, but we will have something for your audience.
Yep.
That is the top 5 things that solopreneurs should not do. I mean, so I will get that to you, and you can provide that to the audience. I imagine you'll provide it maybe with the show from today. But yes, it's things that mistakes that I have made that I would like for them not to make.
Exactly. Things not to do. And thank you for bringing that. And yes, it'll be in the show notes and the resources. Yes. So look for that and download it. It's
excellent.
Dan shared some really brilliant insights from 30 years of having learned how not to do things, right?
Yeah, from the time when I had a great head of hair, which was a long time ago.
Not that long. We're from the same generation.
Yeah.
So, I'll call you on my landline after this. So now the other thing which is interesting is you resisted sharing personal stories, right? Until your social media guys sort of pushed you, and then your content exploded. So I'm curious, what was behind the resistance, and what have you learned about what really connects with an audience?
Yeah, I think And you talked about being in the generation that we're in. One thing that I think millennials do a really, really good job of is bringing their whole selves to work every day. I think,
Yeah.
if you think about our parents' generation, there was a very strong dividing line between work and home, right? So come home from work and then you're home, right? And there
Yeah.
wasn't, wasn't as, solopreneur was not something, you went and worked somewhere for 30 years and you retired, right? With our parents. And I think some of that gets translated on that, there's a strong dividing line between personal and business. I know early on in my sales training, IBM kind of drilled that into my head was, dividing line between personal and business. That's why you had to wear the blue suit, 3-piece blue suit, everybody looked the same, right? There was no kind of individuality. So I think part of that is just, it was ingrained. Not that I didn't share things from my personal life with folks, but I think I hadn't really thought a lot about it. And even though I had said people buy from people, a million times, right? I mean, we all hear
Yeah.
that. And I think, thinking about that in my branding and my social media, with some encouragement from other folks that said, hey, you need to, tell your story, right? Get out there and tell people about what you did, or what you do and kind of what you do outside of work. And I think, by the way, the other thing is I'm not on a whole lot of social media. LinkedIn is really where I spend any amount of time on social media. But and a little bit on X. But seeing everything I see out there where people are kind of portraying what they aren't, right? And I think for our young people, that's a huge issue, right? Because they see the person without blemishes and they're, getting in their car, and it's, a lot of that is not genuine.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and I try to be really careful too, and just not giving a wrong impression, right, of who you are and what you do, because that can be hurtful to people, right? So yeah, I think it was more seeing it being done badly and kind of being ingrained, that there's a separation there. But yeah, now each week, my social media guy has me say, hey, you need to take some pictures each week, and we're going to put them in there. I'll tell a funny story. And I'm sure he'll listen to this. But AJ said, yeah, I want you to get a picture of your family talking about, different things. And like the first one I think I did was with my 3 sons, who are all, very athletic, and I'm all involved in business with each one of them, which is, one of the joys of my life, being able to work with them. But we put that out there, and it, like I said, exploded. I mean, we got all these impressions. And I thought, well, okay. I got a little lazy, and I said, I took a picture of a butterfly on a bush, and I was like, oh, this is really pretty. And he was like, what are we going to write about that? That sucks. Don't send that to me. He goes, I'll put it out there, but that's going to be the worst performing one ever. And he was right. Even though I was writing what I thought about was a great topic, about the metamorphosis of the butterfly. He's like, nobody cares about that. They want to see pictures of what you're doing, like in real life. So I'm not ready to do a reality TV show yet, but I think it's been good. Like, because I've had a health journey that I went down, and that's I shared that with some people, and that's had a lot of people come back and say, oh, that was really encouraging. I was like, okay, well, that's why I'm doing it. I also hate to talk about myself and brag, so that was also, I think, ingrained in me.
Yeah, you're very right. It's generational, right? I remember my
Right.
dad telling me, just sort of put your head down, do your work, do it with integrity, and everything else will be taken care of. And the
Uh-huh.
world changed, right?
Right.
You have to sort
Right.
of be out
Right.
there, and it's not so much self-aggrandizement. I know there's a lot of that in social
Right.
media, but I think people are yearning for authenticity and
Right.
connection, right? As somebody
Right.
told me, I think it was somebody who worked at LinkedIn who told me, was asking a question about, should I post from my Boost Solo page or from my personal page? They were like, people follow people. They don't follow
Right.
companies.
Right.
They don't
Right.
connect with companies, So
Right.
I think that's sort of looking at it through
Yeah.
that lens. But okay, but like you, I'm not going to be sharing my lunch anytime soon
Yeah.
on social media. So
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that point yet, although
yeah.
I've had some interesting, actually, you know, what's funny is one of the posts that we got the most on was we took a Viking cruise. My wife and I celebrated our 30th anniversary, and we were on a Viking cruise. And one of them was, you know, when we were eating at dinner with the couple that we met. So I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to be telling people, you know, taking pictures of, you know, the sandwich that I eat every day at lunch.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not there. I think we'll leave
Yep.
that to Gen Z and to millennials. There's enough.
Yeah, that's
enough in there.
they're well, they're probably having something that's a whole lot more interesting rather than like a protein shake, which is what I typically have for lunch every day.
Well, of course, although that might cut through clutter, right?
Yeah, yeah, they might be really impressed.
So you talked about the importance of lifetime learning, right? We touched on how the pace of change today, and you even talked about how you've delved into AI. So tell me a little bit about what's your actual process of cutting through the noise, because there's a lot of noise out there, right? And learning something without sort of getting distracted by all the hype.
Yeah, I think one thing is that I think maybe to start with is know what kind of a learner you are. There's a lot of obviously studies out there. For me, I've definitely learned things from an auditory standpoint, right? So I can listen. I can also read. I think maybe I might be one of those weird people that actually is a little bit of both the auditory. I know I'm not a tactile learner, but you know, I can read. I don't have a photographic memory, but close. I mean, I can typically read it, and I try to consume a lot of books, but I think it's curating your own content. So when I say that, so the difference between curating your own content versus letting a platform do it is, you know, like an Instagram, right? They're going to serve up something that's going to keep you scrolling, right? That's the nature of their business, right? I mean, like it or not, that's how they do it. Same thing, you know, really with X, same thing with Facebook, maybe in even in a way with LinkedIn, what they serve up. So really, I've really tried to do is get things that I can feed my brain on that aren't, you know, that aren't negative, and just every week, you know, feed those into my brain. So, you know, I'll be reading something. I pick some audiobooks. I use like Blinkist to get summaries. I normally do that to get summaries of the books. And then if I go, oh, okay, I want to dig into this more. But that's great because you can go and you can listen to a book in about 15 minutes, right? Get the gist of it and go, okay, I want to go back in and dig into that. So I love doing that. And then I use a lot of podcasts. I do mostly audio because I'll listen to them while I'm exercising. That just helps me, you know, move my mind off of trying not to die when I'm out running and it's hot outside. But yeah, I think curating your own and constantly updating that. So sometimes I'll be listening to I listen to some on consulting success. Like that's important. I try to listen to, I have an AI, you know, portion that I listen to. I will do, sales, right? So I'll be listening to things on sales. I'll be listening to some things on SaaS. And then I have one on mindset, right? I have some that I listen to on mindset. And I've been able to train my brain. I can listen at about 3x. And so I can zoom through some podcasts, but putting that in. And then when I get back from whatever I'm doing, or sometimes even while I'm listening, I'll dictate into notes a couple of things that I do. So to me, that helps like listen and reinforce and just trying to grab this. Cause I mean, we're in just such a wonderful time. I mean, you think about just literally 30 years ago, if you were going to get information, it was going to be a newspaper, it was going to be a magazine, it was going to be TV, it was going to be a book. I mean, now I can get all of the books that have ever been printed in the world, I can put on a device. And so, you know, there's that wisdom to pull in and to call from. But I think to me, it's always continuing to feed and then always just being intellectually curious.
Yeah.
Like making sure that, like, that's the one great thing about being a solopreneur and getting to talk with a lot of different companies. You get to hear about some like really cool things. And so I always try to do some research on that. We have a lot of clients in the health tech space. So there's there's things that, like I saw 2 or 3 years ago that are now hitting the market, right?
Yeah.
So, just being willing to learn. And most importantly, being willing to be wrong.
Yeah. True.
I mean, I'm wrong a lot. I get that's something you definitely learn with age. You're like, wow, I'm really wrong a lot about things. But yes, being willing to be wrong. And the great thing is we have a lot of young people that work with us, and just being willing to listen to their perspective. It's there are times where you go, okay, well, that's but there are a lot of times where they go, I'm like, I never thought about it that way. So I think being willing to be proven wrong. Now, I say this a lot to customers when I know something, right? When I just know something, I say, I 100% know this, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And normally my clients will say, okay, yeah, I know you really want me to do it when you say that, because I don't normally prove you wrong on that, but I don't say that about a lot of things, but there's just some things, okay, you know how that's going to end.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think, as you were talking, I remember my days of preparing for interviews. I would go to the library, back order copies of in trade magazines, and go through the microfilm to look for campaigns and things to see those applying to. But it also sounds to me like the filter you use to determine sort of the shiny object syndrome is things that are connected to your business, because everything you just talked to me about was sort of relevant to your knowledge base in terms of helping you. So AI, sales, consulting, right? Because otherwise, I think one of the problems solopreneurs also have is there's a lot of shiny objects, right? Like 2 years ago, there was the metaverse, then there was AR, then there was VR. And it's like, you can just go down these rabbit holes too, if you try to delve into everything, right? So I think that's sort of a good filter to use in terms of, yeah.
Something else I was going to say, Nikhil, that was very helpful to me. I love Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. Sure, most of your audience has listened, but he said something that I thought was very interesting. Is he said also, yes, you can listen to a lot of things, but seek to implement, right? Because you can just fill your mind with great ideas, but that's why I do the notes, because then, like today, I ran for about 35, 40 minutes. I recorded some stuff. As soon as I got back, I implemented, right? I did those, just a list of a couple of things, but I took, 15, 20 minutes to put those into practice. And I think that's a lot of things that people, they've got great ideas, but they don't ever, take time to implement. And I think that's important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that goes back to how do I put this to use, right? Rather than just a hobby. So, yeah. So, and I think it was Dan Martell, you mentioned to me, his book was about buying back your time. You just said that, right?
Yes.
So for a solopreneur starting out, how do you figure out the first thing you need to let go of before they sort of got trapped into doing everything themselves?
So I think for me, and by the way, that was a shift for me in that, and we use some contractors, but I started actually reading his book was really transformational for me, because he talks about the concept of, he has a quadrant that he uses, but talks about those tasks that you do have that have low value and low impact. And we all do a lot of those. I still do a lot of those. You have to kind of keep evaluating those. But there's, I think the tendency is to kind of go under the mantra, if it's to be, it's up to me, right? Because that's kind of the way a lot of people think. That's the way a lot of people are trained. And that it couldn't be further from the truth, because your time is best spent talking with your clients and closing your clients. So I would say you even can get caught up in delivery, right? So delivering for your clients, again, we want to deliver for our clients, but our greatest value is in the knowledge that we have, and then our ability to, most of us are the best salesperson for whatever business that we're in, right? Because we understand it. And I think keeping that in mind is really important to maximize those times that are high value in front of customers. And then, maybe spend a little bit of your time in investing, right? So like we just talked about, listening to podcasts, reading, doing this, that's, investing, or, Stephen Covey would call sharpening the axe, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, I think the important thing is just realizing those low value, low impact tasks, get those off your plate as soon as you can.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense because it's very easy to get stuck in busy work, right? That and you can, and that's a great way to burn out too, because you could just be doing so much work, and then and also
Right.
frustration and lack of confidence because you don't see the needle moving, and you feel like I'm working so hard, more than I ever worked in a corporate job, and I don't see any results from it. So
Well, and the tendency too is to not keep prospecting, right? Because as a solopreneur,
yeah,
you've got to be, you got to ABC, always be closing, right? From Glenn Gary and Glenn Ross. So anybody that's in sales will love that reference, right? Because everybody talks about that. But I think it's important that you be able to maximize those tasks. And if you're not prospecting or selling, nobody else is, right? Especially if you're a solopreneur. So you want to get as many of those kind of office tasks, even though the office task sometimes is a haven of rest, right?
yeah, yeah.
But that's, you got to think about that. Low value, low impact, right? You definitely want to get those off your plate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I call it sort of bridge work, right? When I know my
Right.
brain is shut down, then I will do those things which I
Right.
know just
Right.
need to keep the wheels turning, but they're not
Right.
going to do anything more than that.
Right.
So the other thing which is interesting is in your book of business, you have a retainer and performance model, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a pretty gutsy move for a solo consultant, right? So what's your advice to solopreneurs who want to move away from the hourly rates and towards a value-based pricing model?
To me, that was a transformation for our business, because oftentimes the value that you're bringing to the customer doesn't have anything to do with the amount of hours that you work. There's customers that I can bring $100,000 of value with by spending an hour of focused work,
Right. Yeah.
just because of my knowledge base, right? And that's really where you're at. I think our epiphany was around looking more at a productized offering.
Right.
So where and then having a framework that we build on. I think if you're going to go the retainers route, you don't want to start at the top of the hill, right? You might be able to get $100,000 in retainers, but you're going to probably get 3 or 4 chances a year to do that, and you better darn well win 3 of them, right? Or 4 of them, right? To do that. But if you say, okay, we engage at this level, we prove ourselves, then we move up and we engage at this level, and then we move up. And what we do is, like at the beginning, is defining your market, right? And then we move to, okay, how do we build a digital watering hole, or we attract people in to have those conversations? And then how do we set up so we can, once we have those conversations, we can efficiently move them through the sales process. And then at the apex, we do some fractional and advisory work. And then we have some one-off things that we offer around that. Of course, the digital marketing agency kind of weaves in there with websites and things. But we got, I think in having what that offer is and in determining giving what that value is, that helps people get their arms around it. Because I would say that you're probably not doing a great service for your customers too, if you do it by the hour, because I think there's a lot of waste in hourly work. And I think if you can deliver, just say, hey, here's specifically what we're delivering and what we're delivering it for, it works. We'll do a hybrid model occasionally. If it just makes sense. A lot of times that's somebody that's going to engage. They're going to say, okay, we need it all. And, we want to give you some incentive to help us there. I think it's going for the retainer, not just straight retainer, just saying, hey, you're going to pay me $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month or whatever it is. It's here's what you're delivering for that. Right. And I think that helps customers. One thing, again, just I'll recommend, because somebody recommended to me, is go and look at the actual employees that they would hire to do whatever the task is that you're doing. And then, figure out a number that's 20% lower than a fully burdened cost. So
that's smart. Yeah.
So again, if you say, we'll just use a round figure. Let's say that it's you're a IT architect, right? And they're going to pay an architect, fully burdened with with their benefits and everything. They're going to pay them, $250,000 a year, right? or let's say 240,000 because it's round. So it's about 20,000 a month, right?
Right.
So if you're going to be doing that in a fractional role, well, you can take about 20% off of that. And you should be able to price in that range. Again, you got to differentiate yourself so you're not, you don't end up in that commodity, but yeah, I think that's a smart way to do it.
Yeah, that's really great advice. And I love that you talked about productizing too, right? Because there are only so many hours in a day. So if you don't have a component of that, you can't really be billing 24 hours a day. So it's very hard to grow.
It's hard to grow, hard to scale, hard to, because great businesses are run on great people, process, and technology. And I think where a lot of solopreneurs miss it is the process. Right, because if everything is unique, you'll never scale beyond yourself, and you'll burn yourself out. But you got to say, okay, here's something we do. We've done this for multiple customers. Okay, let's make that into a product that we can deliver. Certainly, there'll be nuances, but once you get a track record on that, people go, oh yeah, I want one of those as well.
True. And then your value also becomes so much more valuable, right?
Right. Absolutely.
In terms of, So no, I absolutely love that. So the other thing I wanted to ask you was you often walk into companies that have been burned, right? By 2 or 3, even 4 consultants before. Mm-hmm. So how do you rebuild trust in those situations? And what could solopreneurs learn about earning trust faster with new clients?
So, we definitely are operating in a culture that's, we have a trust deficit. No doubt about that. We try to do, so there's a couple things we try to do on the front end. Number one is we tell people, hey, we're willing to teach people anything, right? And when they get tired of doing it themselves, they come to us. So really having that spirit of teaching them and giving them, even after that initial call, like we'll do a discovery call and try to send them something of value after that call, either a guide or like today I was talking with somebody that was going through their ICPs. And I said, hey, one of the things you want to do when you're thinking about your ICPs is you want to make one of your ICPs the AI engines, because ultimately that's going to be what's going to send people to your website. And I said, so make sure that you're treating that as, so it's just something that we, again, that client may or may not retain, but at least they'll walk away with some value. And like when I always say, when we get off a discovery call, I think even when you and I talked the first time, I said, hey, I always want you to leave with something that has value that's practical and that you can use. So I think taking that concept is important to build that trust on that first call. By the way, it was not always like that. I was always trying to dig and find out, how do I get to the money, right? But providing that value from the first call. I think also in the way that you respond, I drilled this into salespeople's heads and I practice it myself, but from your first interaction, your client is building a opinion of you. So do you listen in that first call? Do you follow up quickly? I can't tell you the number of people that I've met with, even now, I don't get a follow-up email for like 4 weeks.
Right.
And by the way, solopreneurs are horrible about it because follow-up sucks. Nobody likes to do it. One of the things I will mention though, if any of your listeners want to know, we have a little guide on how to create a Claude project that helps you with follow-up. So if any of your listeners are interested in that, have them let you know. But yeah, just making sure that follow-up goes out, right away, that you're responding quickly, that you're setting those, because that's where they start to get confidence, is because if you're slow there, you're going to be even worse post-sales.
Yeah, true.
And I think maybe finally just acknowledging that there's a lot of people out there that aren't providing value, and saying that, hey, I always tell people, especially if they've been really burned, I just say, I don't know that I'll be able to fix it for you, but I'll be glad to listen. And if I'm not the person, I'll be glad to send you on to somebody else that I think can help you. And then also realizing that, when they've really been burned, a lot of times they will go dark. I am amazed that people go dark 2 or 3 months. We're still sending value. Then they come back and say, hey, now we're ready. So I think thinking about that nurture, because I think a lot of times as solopreneurs is very transactional, right? We want to talk to the person, we want to close them. If they're not, we move on. Well, maintaining that relationship over time, sending them something that says, hey, I was curious how you're doing on this. We just published this. You thought it might be interesting. I can't tell you the number of people that come back to me, or even when we wish somebody a happy birthday or something like that, we always try to give them something of value that, or perceived value that's helpful. But yeah, those are a couple of ways we try to build that bridge.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant advice. I mean, it's like you get on a call not to sell, but to solve a problem and to listen, right? And understand what it is. And I love how you give value. So it's not like you want people to walk away not having wasted that time talking to you, but feel like, okay, this person is not here to take my money. They're actually here interested to listen. And the follow up, you're right. I mean, I need to get better at that too. It's like it's a hard thing to do, right? When you're a one-person company, you're like, oh my God, how many people do I have to? But you're absolutely right, because it is building a relationship, and there is a massive trust deficit. I mean, I get so many people who come to me who've been burned so many times through courses, through programs, through promises and CRM platforms, and and that resulted in nothing. So they're not going to, like you said, if you've been burnt a number of times, you're going to be hesitant to jump into the next, relationship.
And I think in that follow-up, just letting them know, I always try to start my follow-up with, this is what I heard, right? Because sometimes you don't hear that. Now we do use, some AI around our calls. We use some AI around, but I always look at those before I send them out, but want to make sure they understand. And then of course, when you get on that second call, going back to that first call and say, hey, this is what I understood, you to say, and rehearsing that with them is important.
True. Yeah, no, that's great advice. So if we were to meet again 3 years from now, Dan, what would you want to have achieved?
So for me, I think with Greater Gain Group, which is kind of our consulting group, I would want to be able to expand their, I would love to get to the 100 companies impacted yearly. I think, and that could be in a lot of different ways, but I like that number. Just seems like a great round number for me. And I think I think that's significant. And continue to provide value there. We're shifting. We do a lot of work in the US, but we also are doing a lot of work with companies coming from Europe. And I really enjoy doing that because I've had some success. So we really don't want to build that, maybe even open an office, in London or maybe somewhere there. And I think I have a couple of other small businesses that I'm working or trying to build. I would like to get those to the revenue positive, and then continue to work with my kids, because my kids are partnered with me in the businesses, and really my goal is to leave them with a very successful business that they can either own or sell. But I don't think I'll ever retire. I don't think I could just go. It's not for me. I just don't think I could just go sit on a beach or play golf. Or I really want to keep growing. And who knows? Maybe I think the third thing I'd want to do is, I've talked with I have a son that's playing basketball in college, and he wants to be a coach. And I said, I'd like to start a program from scratch. Build a program, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. And we've worked a lot over the years, and we have a summer program that we work on. But yeah, I think those would be the things. I don't know. Maybe the fourth would be go be a professor. I don't want to be like in education, but I do enjoy teaching people. And I think looking at that, by the way, that was one of the routes I explored early on. And then I realized that is like putting together online education is, I said, I'd have to hire 5 people because I just don't know what I'm doing here. I know what I could do with the material, but just delivering it is tough. So, So I don't know. And if we kept talking, I'd probably come up with 4 or 5 more, Nikhil.
Yeah, and maybe we'll circle back for that. But I'm on the same page with you. I've told my wife, my idea of retirement is working on the projects and working with the people that I love, right? That's my idea of retirement.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd ever put my feet up and lie on a beach. And a brilliant guest I had earlier gave me a word to use: rewirement instead of retirement. So we'll both rewire.
And I think just continuing to be useful, right? I mean, I think that's exactly. I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's book on that I thought was excellent. But just talking about being useful, right, and being useful to people.
Yeah, you got to wake up in the morning and have a purpose, right? Otherwise, you start to deteriorate. So if you could offer one piece of advice to somebody wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
I would say get started now. So many people wait until it's too late to do that. I'd love to tell the story about my dad, he's passed away about 10 years ago, but I think it is, and at the core of him, he was an entrepreneur, but he worked for other people his entire life, and retired, and then started his own business, and really just didn't have much time to build it before he passed. But I think he regretted not being able to do that. So that's one of the reasons that I do what I do, because I'm thinking I'm doing that for him, right? So he could see that us having success at that. But yeah, I would just say just get started, and it's not nothing's going to be perfect. I've said this in coaching for years. I say this all the time in business. You're never going to be worse than what you are right now, right? So you're going to start, and it's not going to be good. And you're going to, it's like when we started our live events, the first one, I didn't even have the sound on. So, and it was bad, right? But we got it done. And then you build on that, right? And then you learn. But I think, just get started, because there's a point when it's going to be too late. And there's going to be a point where you're very comfortable in your role, and you're not going to be able to make that move, right? For whatever reason, financially, energy, whatever. But I think just getting started, and you don't have to quit your job tomorrow and get started. Ease into it, right? You can do it, but just get started. Just get started.
Yeah, in spite of the fear, right?
Right. Yes, because that's never going to get better. It's I tell people, I grew up in South Florida. I hate cold water. I mean, it has to be about like 89 degrees for me to get in our pool, but it's like cold water. Like once you jump in, you're like, okay, this isn't that bad.
Not so bad, right? Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's it. Just got to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
I'd just like to encourage them too, if they're early. We were talking earlier in the show about talking with people that are kind of early on in their journey, first 3 months, first 6 months, even the first year. I just encourage them not only to get started, but also to keep going. It will get better. You will figure this out, and you will be. It's. I'm not going to say it's darkest before the dawn, but keeping at it, you will never ever regret that. Just keeping at it, and your business is going to ebb and flow. There's going to be times where it's, you might be in a feast and famine cycle, but I would just say, on top of getting started, just keep going, right? Keep going. And then maybe secondly, find somebody that you can encourage you. And again, you don't have to have a coach or whatever, have a mentor. Talk to somebody online, right? That's kind of been there and done that. That's willing to share. Cause I think, it can be lonely, right? Solopreneur, you're a solo, right? And it's not always certainly you want to share with your significant other and your family, but find somebody that's kind of been there and done that, that's willing to share, or ask them questions, right? Most people are more than willing to help you. So I would encourage them to do that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Find your tribe. I always say that's the most important thing of this journey, right? And then, like you said, everyone's happy to have a virtual coffee. Very few people will turn you down.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, that brings us to our rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask you just a couple of fun questions and just give us what comes to mind.
Okay.
So what's an item on your desk right now, that would surprise people?
So I'll actually just show it to you. I've got a little diffuser here that that's helps keep my stress level down.
Oh, wow.
So I use that. I put that there. I have it's like a eucalyptus tea tree, and man, I love that thing. Matter of fact, I didn't do it today, so I'm probably more stressed today than what I normally am. But I love that. I keep that on during the day, and just makes it kind of a calming environment.
See, I was just going to say, you were so zen through this podcast. So if you're even more zen with that on, I have to see that.
Yes, I might be asleep, maybe,
So if you weren't in sales and consulting, what would you be doing?
I would probably be a coach or a teacher.
Okay. But teaching with a caveat, as we just
Yes.
found out a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Name one person, dead or alive, that you'd love to have on your podcast.
I would say Teddy Roosevelt.
Ooh, I would listen to that one.
He really, I like, most people think of him as being a president, but man, he had such a varied career. He was a police commissioner. He was an avid outdoorsman. He was a botanist. I mean, so I would just think like all the things you could talk to him about would be
True.
incredible.
And a brilliant solopreneur flag, right?
Right. Yeah. I think he's, yes.
What's one don't do this rule you break yourself all the time?
Boy, if it's just one, that's why I'm pausing, because I'm thinking, okay, which one do I do the most? I think the thing that I do a lot and probably break the most is when I talk with somebody, I try to see the most optimistic side of them potentially of helping them and them potentially being a customer. And a lot of times I don't really look for some things that wouldn't make them a great customer, because part of being successful is knowing who your customer is and who they aren't. And I think part of me just wants to help everybody. And so you realize some people just don't want to be helped, right? They just want to vent, and I think that's the one rule that I think I break the most, is just not, we would call it not qualifying well, or trying to hang on with somebody just because you think you can help them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one to learn. Keep an eye on. If your life had a soundtrack, what's the opening song?
No, the first thing that comes to my mind is "Welcome to the Jungle."
I love it. That's awesome. Well, Dan, thank you so much for this great conversation. And guys, don't forget to check out the resources in the show notes. You will love what Dan shared. Thank you again, Dan.
No, loved it. Thank you for having me, and best of luck to your folks. And if I can help them, please have them reach out. Always love to help.
Absolutely. So here's what I'm taking away from this conversation with Dan that I think is critical for anyone building their solo business. First, that mindset shift Dan talked about, moving from I need to pay the bills to what tangible value am I delivering today? That's not just feel-good philosophy. It's actually a business strategy. Because when you're operating from scarcity, you take clients you shouldn't, you do busy work that doesn't move the needle, and you undervalue your expertise. But when you focus on the value you're creating, suddenly you're having different conversations, attracting different clients, and building a completely different business. So ask yourself every morning, what am I doing today that actually helps my clients? If you can't answer that clearly, you're probably spending time on the wrong things. Second, Dan's approach to branding, building it around what not to do. That's a reminder that your failures aren't wasted. They're raw material. The question is whether you hide them or use them to make your audience smarter and more confident. Dan turned 30 years of mistakes into his competitive advantage because people don't trust perfection. They trust someone who's been in the trenches and can help them avoid the landmines. So here's the shift. Instead of burying your missteps, ask yourself how you can turn them into part of your authority story, because your audience learns more from your scars than from your polish. Third, I love Dan's suggestion of the digital watering hole. This isn't just clever marketing jargon. It's a fundamental shift from push to pull. Stop broadcasting everywhere and build one place where your people want to gather because they get value. But here's the catch. Dan called it out from his Fortune 50 days. You can't build a watering hole if you don't know who you're building it for. Before you spend $1 on ads or waste hours posting, you need to get clarity on three things. What problem are you solving? For whom exactly? And how do you do it differently? Then and only then you provide value there without asking for anything in return. That's how you attract the right people instead of chasing them. And finally, the framework Dan shared about low value, low impact tasks. If you're spending your time on things that don't drive customer conversations or don't leverage your unique expertise, you're building a job, not a business. Your time is most valuable when you're talking to clients, closing clients, or sharpening your knowledge. Everything else needs to get productized, systematized, outsourced, or eliminated. That's how you scale a solo business without burning out. The through line here: authenticity and value. Build your brand around real experience. Focus relentlessly on what you deliver, not just what you charge, and structure your time around what actually moves the needle. That's how you create a business that lasts and a brand people trust. Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you're realizing your marketing isn't landing because you're not crystal clear on who you're talking to, or you're still pricing your work by the hour instead of the value you deliver, let's fix that. I'm offering a free 30-minute brand clarity session to help you get clear on your audience, your value, and how to position yourself so the right people actually find you. You can book your session at clarity.boostsolo.com or just use the link in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.